Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. Today, I am chatting with Courtney Ksiazek. She is the Senior Director of Partnership Marketing at Angel City Football Club. Welcome, Courtney.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm super excited to dive through your journey, which, as you mentioned before, is very sports heavy. And so we've interviewed some women in sports marketing, but I think your journey is actually very, very unique and different. So I'm excited to go through on what yours was like and how you ended up where you are now. So lots to cover. But before we do, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, as a senior director of partnership marketing, I oversee all of our partnership activation. So, sports teams have brand partnerships that are typically long term, various levels, various assets, and I oversee the execution of all those things we promise. On top of that, built a soccer club from the bottom up, early days being employee number 23, I think, and just doing a lot of things in between my actual job. But I've been in sports and been an athlete my whole life. So it's been great to combine all those things together in my job now.
I mean, a little teaser of what we're going to dive into later because Courtney's doing some really interesting things at her role now. I also see that a lot of your career has to do with soccer. So I'm assuming you play soccer.
I do a little bit still, but did my whole life. It's a lot harder to recover these days, though. It'll take me 3, 4 full days, but still worth it sometimes to get out there and kick it again.
Yeah, I played soccer all growing up, did like the high school club thing, and my aunts did too, and they were better than me. They played in like college and did all of that. But
Yeah.
they say the same thing now. They play a lot less because in soccer you get pretty bad injuries too
I
that
know. And I have friends with really serious injuries, and it's so much harder to recover now as like a grown adult than when you were young. So you had to be cautious. And I'm like, I know where I should be on the field. I just can't get there anymore. The speed has definitely taken a hit over the years.
yeah, it's definitely tough. So let's go back to your undergrad. Can you tell me a little bit about what your time was like there doing sports and what you chose to study?
Yeah, so I studied business, kind of got a well-rounded business degree in undergrad at Northern Illinois University, just outside Chicago. Originally from the area and really wanted to keep playing soccer, so was able to play soccer there as well, a small D1 school. And it certainly kept me very involved in a lot of different things. I was always pretty, just involved in a lot of different groups and activities, societies, that kind of thing. And sports was one of the things that I really leaned into. And so my time there, I think, was really well spent in just getting a lot of different experiences, both from the school side and then just in leadership, being able to be in groups that were athlete focused or, captain's council of the team and all that. And then as I was going through my 4 years there, it was like a couple weeks before my senior game, right? Your last game as a senior, and you're like, oh wow, like everything is going to change. You've been playing this game since I was 3 years old. And, although there's a lot of things that were exciting and, freedom and things that I probably never had being so regimented for those 4 years, it was kind of sad for me to be able to say, oh, like I'm walking away from this sport and sports in general. That was such an intimate type of, relationship. It's not just I was a sports fan. I was involved, obviously, as a player and got to see a lot of different things. So I had a couple influential people that, asked me if I was interested in grad school and what that could look like. But ultimately, used my time in undergrad to realize what I wanted to get more into, which was sports. I didn't know what that meant or what even opportunities existed, but I had done a couple like just general business internships in undergrad, and I was like, this is cool, but I'm like kind of bored. The athlete mind of me, it's really rapid and there's a lot of, you're used to really fast pace. And I think what I saw as like a general normal job just felt a little boring and a little bit, it was fine, but it wasn't a fit for me.
So, what did you do with that information? So, you figure out, I don't want the normal job. And I feel like a lot of people may resonate with that, but there's doesn't seem like there's a lot of options out there to go get the non-normal job that maybe satisfies the person that likes the fast-paced environment. So, how did you kind of approach next steps with that?
Yeah, so I kind of, at first I didn't know where to turn because I had spent so much of my time and energy, in one space, which was being an athlete. And so I really took time and had some professors help or just other people help like list out transferable skills. Like that can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be from athlete to quote unquote normal life, but it can be anything that you've had experience in. What does that actually transfer to? And so that was a really key exercise that I probably did not so formally at first, and then more formally like later in my last year of undergrad. And then I talked to some people that I trusted. We had a sport AD, so sporting athletic director that oversaw soccer and a few other sports, and just came to him. I was like, hey, you work in sports, clearly, right? You come to our games and you help us with, organizing things for our coaches and whatnot as an administrator. Like, what do you do? And so I just literally made the initial connection of like, okay, you're around sports, like you must have something to do with this. And so he was really influential to say, oh, there's like a lot of different ways to go. There's not just the college route, which is what you're used to. There's professional sports. There's kind of third party and background and a lot of different things. So he's the one who turned me on to even thinking about grad school. And ultimately, I started applying after speaking with him, just knowing I didn't have core sport experience of like working in it, just those transferable skills that I wanted to learn the industry of sport after playing it.
I love that approach there of trying to get a broader perspective of what your options are out of college. And that's a huge driver for why I even started this podcast, is because you typically go in and there's kind of like these main things that you feel like you're supposed to do or you can do, or that the classes that you take in college, and you kind of like go look online and you see job titles, but they may not mean a lot. And even as you get older, you realize like job titles also really mean nothing, and that, roles vary so much across companies and industries. And so doing what the research that you did, and just talking to people and just like learning and being open-minded about what is out there, because there's so much more out there than you can even possibly imagine, especially when you're just starting your career and just don't really know where to go or where to look. It's really great if you have people, in your life that you can trust, or even just using the resources at your school, or using LinkedIn to do coffee chats, I think is super valuable.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And I don't know, I think people these days are slightly more used to like cold outreach on LinkedIn, or maybe just social media has made us feel more connected, but that was super intimidating. Thinking back to that time, I was really uncomfortable to be like, one, I need help, and two, I don't know what I don't know, which I think also resonates with a lot of people, and especially athletes. Sometimes you feel like you have less than, even though you actually have a lot more skill. So, it's for anybody that, you have to kind of build that confidence and build that muscle of reaching out, because that stuff doesn't stop. You're in a job and you want a different job, like you have to do that networking. You have to do that outreach to see what your transferable skills are at every level of your career.
I'm so glad you mentioned that you were scared, because I think that so many people feel that way, and that's normal. So if you are listening, you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying. Courtney felt that way. Most people feel that way. It's totally normal. And it feels uncomfortable. You're right. But
Totally.
you also have to keep doing it even past your first job.
Totally. And I think someone probably told me along the line, and it's definitely true today, like just be honest with that, like own it. Like that's the advice I think I give for it whenever I'm asked. It's like, if you don't know what to ask, just say that. Like, I don't know what to ask you. Like, how do you typically talk in some of these informational chats, or like what's something that's you wish you knew? Like ask one question and people tend to like to talk. So just be honest with like what you don't know, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, that's amazing advice too. And people also, especially I think people that have more experience, love talking about advice. Like it's kind of like how you may not listen to your parents, but your parents probably love giving you advice. A lot of times, people that have more experience than you enjoy talking to younger people and getting to advise them, so that way you can hopefully, avoid the mistakes they made. And so you're totally right. If you just said, I really don't know what to ask, they will probably be able to talk and not stop talking and be able to help you in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're doing this research, you find out other opportunities that are out there for you other than just the traditional steps outside of college. And so you look for this, look to a master's program. What were kind of the next steps you took? You applied. Is this kind of immediately what you did after undergrad? Did you work for a little bit, or kind of what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I started helping out in the athletic department just because I had been done with playing. And so just had some like couple month experience doing admin stuff or stuffing envelopes for the fundraising team, like just anything, right? Like that's how everyone has started at some point in their career. And so when I was really considering grad school, it was right like fall-ish time. And I realized, oh, all these applications are due February for the following fall. And I was like, oh, that's quick. And like, what a fun holiday experience that year of just working out all the paperwork and all the essays and things you need. And so I really took it as an opportunity to say, okay, here's like, I just started Googling like, what are some sports business programs? And some people I reached out to that I just saw on LinkedIn that had gone there or not. And I applied to probably almost 20, maybe 10 to 15 even, just postgraduate programs all over the country. And I was personally open to that. I think that's another big consideration when people are considering a master's degree anywhere. Like, are you willing to go to a different state depending on what the, program level is or notoriety or anything like that? So I was really open to that. And ended up kind of going through the like full process with 3 of the top sports business programs. I really was strategic on spending time on the ones that were the most notable, that had the most alumni, that just really were the top. I thought to myself, if I want to go to grad school, I want to go somewhere that is really going to be worth my time and, have that kind of like additional benefit outside of just having the degree. So I ended up landing on Ohio University, which is consistently in the top 1 to 2 in the whole country for postgraduate sports programs and placement, alumni, all the things. And it really was a tremendous experience. I think I get asked a lot about like, should I go to grad school? Should I not? Like, no matter what industry you're in. And it's going to be a personal question. It's never going to be a blanket answer of like, to get to X role, you have to have a degree. Like, I do think it is helpful if you plan to be a president of any company. Like, there are just hard skills you want to learn. But that said, like, that's not the case for everyone. And so you can't really compare people, if you have it or if you don't. But for me, it was very much rooted in, I know that I don't know anything about this industry, but I want to be in it. And so it afforded me the opportunity to learn from a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and build a network of people all trying to do the same thing as me, which was to work in sports. So if that's a driver for you in a different industry, I think it can be really useful. And it gave me relationships that I've had all through my whole life already, and I know I'll have for the rest of my life, both professionally and personally. And I think as again, athlete and knowing yourself a little bit, I long for some of those like personal and professional connections that go beyond the field, right? So I'm just used to having that really like team camaraderie, and I've always found that in sports, and I found that in our grad program as well. So yeah, it's definitely different for everyone. But for me, it was the right move to just broaden my horizon to know, what does the job in this industry even look like?
I think that's a universal reason or universal pro for grad school is the network that you build. And I hear that consistently across, when you ask people, and you're right, that the decision to take or not to take a master's is totally personal. And there's multiple paths to getting somewhere. But the network that you build, irregardless of what industry, is typically one of the most valuable things you'll get out of that. And especially I'm in sports too, which is really competitive. It is very valuable to know people that work at the organizations that you potentially want to work at and to be able to spend time with them and to grow your network. And so I feel like if that is something that's, you feel like you need to build, a master's program is a really, really great place to get that.
Yeah, totally.
So you went and you got your master's program at an incredible university over at Ohio. What did you, at the end of it, what did you learn about yourself or learn about where you wanted to be within the sports industry?
Yeah. So I was there for, it was a 2-year program, and it completely flipped what I thought I wanted to do. So going in, I thought I wanted to be an athletic director. I wanted to work in college sports, and I wanted to, provide opportunities for student athletes, which I still love. And I loved my time as a student athlete. I think there's so many benefits to play at any level, any sport, for anyone out there. But I came in and also realized the industry as a whole, what levers affect what jobs, what roles, what institutions, what companies are involved, and all the things that go into it. And so just in learning all of that, it led me more down a path of being more in marketing and more on the professional sports side. It's a little more business focused. It has a different feel when it comes to the type of jobs you have, the type of environments you have. And for myself, I think I learned that I'm a city person, and moving to a college town was not, a personal choice that I think I was ready for my 3rd college town, in my adult life. And so just learning more about yourself through that process too was really valuable. And I certainly found a lot of value in that. So I definitely learned like what type of career path did I want? And that led me into events at first and then marketing and partnerships. And I wouldn't have known that had I not, had the experiences in grad school, both some on internships of, one-off events helping out, and some just talking to people. And those 2 years afforded me the opportunity to talk to as many people as I possibly could, and asked pretty much all the same questions. What did you do and how did you get there? And do you like it? And that really, I think, opened some doors and taught me how to maintain relationships in a professional setting.
Was there a place or a type of person with a job or a job category that because you asked, oh, what did you do and do you like it, that you consistently heard people say they don't really like, or anything that was kind of maybe you thought was really cool, but
Yeah.
love it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think like social media, this was a little bit ago. It's not like I was just there in now times where like social is like the place to be and there's like 100 roles and no matter what the company, whatever, that whole era was just kind of getting started. And so I knew that really wasn't for me. It was a little more creative and just the public facing of that. I also just have a terrible social media game now, so it's probably good that I didn't get into it. So I think that was an area that it wasn't like people were like not happy with it, but I knew from what they were saying that I was like, that's probably not something that I'm going to be good at or enjoy. So that was one early on that I think I kind of put to bed.
I love the asking people or if you like it. And I also like asking people, why did you choose that? When I was in college, my plan was actually to go into finance, and I was in a business fraternity, and I started asking all of the like upper people, like, oh, like, what are you studying? What do you want to do? And why? And I realized that everyone that wanted to go into like accounting or finance did it for job security. Everyone that wanted to go into marketing did it because they were passionate about it and were creative about it, and not like one is the right or wrong, but that I resonated more with the people in marketing, and I ended up adding that onto my major. And so you learn, I think it's cool to ask questions like that to people, and just like, why do you do it? Do you like it? And I think that can be a good navigator for what is right for you.
Totally. And something I probably didn't ask that I ask now in just my own connections or maintaining relationships that I do have, like, what's the lifestyle that you want? Right. And so lifestyle is different than job. And so looking at outside the hours of a typical workday, like, what are you getting into? Do your peers or potential peers like have a life out of work? Is that important to you? Is, having different time like that, or hobbies, or just a work environment that is flexible enough to have that. Those are all just as important as the job itself, which I think we've all learned more in the last 3 to 5 years, but something that I think will be a mainstay for the working culture.
That's a really good one to add, Courtney. I love that one. I also I wanted to be a lawyer for like a stint, and I did an internship at a law firm, and I had the most like two most amazing female mentors. Both of them were really older, and just all I did was work, right? Like 7 a.m. to like midnight, they were in the office working. And it was a very like clear indicator, like, okay, maybe this isn't the path for me. And so I think the lifestyle piece is equally as important as what you're doing. And so I love that question. Yeah. Like, what do you do outside of work? Or, what is your lifestyle like? I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
So after this master's program, you went to the US Soccer Federation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did.
Can you tell me about your time there?
Yeah, so I had worked for kind of a per diem, like ad hoc events for the Federation for a little bit, for about a year. And while I was in grad school, and then a full-time position opened up. And one of the things I credit to getting that, which is, super competitive role, is maintaining relationships. I really learned how to do that, and doing some of the one-off things. You never know who you're going to meet or who you're going to impress or who is the decision maker ultimately. And so through maintaining relationships, even when I wasn't working for them directly for that week at a time or whatever it was, checking in, having those casual interactions, keeps you top of mind. And so the role was open, and it was actually in events. So not exactly what I wanted to do, but ultimately made the decision to take it because I knew it was going to be tangential to things I did want to do, which was sponsorship and marketing. Events are a great place to start because you touch almost every department, right? You have to ask everybody for things, you're putting it all together. And just event mindset, especially in sports, although I think it's universal, it just teaches you how to think on your feet, how to be cool under pressure. And again, transferable things that were going to be really important to me and, be good skills to have later in my career. And so I was there in that role for about a year. And then I made it really open to my boss of like, hey, I ultimately want to get into sponsorship. If you ever hear of anything or if there's any opportunities, please keep me in mind. And thankfully he'd been an advocate for me in different rooms and was able to make a, transition to a different department and start doing sponsorship. So I did that for a couple of years after on the activation team. So working with the partners of US Soccer and activating all over the country. So we were going to all the stadiums pretty much in the whole country, soccer stadiums, NFL stadiums, wherever the national teams were being hosted when they were domestic. We were there putting on the activation. So things like signage and the fan fest zones and hosting partners, tickets, all those things too. So it really was a fast track into the event work that I did that translated into, yes, events, but on a kind of more elevated scale and marketing focused with these brand partners that we had. And it was fast and furious. We worked a lot, traveled all over, but a really great group of people to work with and put on these really incredible events that are one of a kind when the national team comes around and you get to see Alex Morgan play. It got to touch a lot of different parts of what I loved about sports. And still do.
That's incredible. It sounds like such a great place to start with your sports career. I can't imagine something that sounds more fun than what you were doing. So you started your I guess is the big start to your career within sports was with the US Soccer Federation, and you kind of got to find out that partnerships potentially was like more of your niche and what you were really interested in. You then ended up going on to San Jose Earthquake Soccer, doing the same type of partnership marketing. Can you talk to me a little bit about your transition there and what your role looked like over at San Jose Earthquakes?
Yeah, so at US Soccer was really an intense but awesome experience, but not super sustainable just from the lifestyle and the travel and all the things else I wanted to do in my career. And so when the opportunity came about, a good actual friend of mine and mentor from who I met in grad school actually ended up hiring me at San Jose. So again, keeping those long-term relationships have really just made my career possible. But ultimately made that move to get club experience. There's different areas of sport you can work in, and working for a club versus the federation are different. And so working there and staying in the sport of soccer was really great just to see it from a different lens, how partners work there, what kind of partnerships. It's different. You have a season and different things like owning your venue and going to the same venue every time versus traveling around and being a bit of a traveling circus. We're just experiences that I wanted to have. Years being able to be promoted to director, managing people for the first time, like that type of just ability to take on in a different environment was just a really great add-on to what I already had built at my previous role. So it was kind of an opportunity to have a different look, but a way to also just increase, I think, my influence on a company that, was a little bit smaller, a little bit more agile at the time.
So before we get into your next role at Angel City Football Club, what were some of the things that these roles, so you've already showed us that you're really good at asking smart questions to other people, but are you asking yourself questions during these roles to kind of figure out where you want to go next or what the next move is for you? Or are you doing things to be like mindful about your experience or if you like it or not in order to decide like when and where your next move should be?
Yeah, moving jobs is hard. I mean, especially when you're early in your career and just making sure it's the right move. But I do think there's an element of you can make any job valuable to yourself for at least a year, right? So if I truly hated it, I knew like, okay, a year I would learn something and then I could find something else. On top of that, moving across the country from Chicago to California was a very large move. I, had lived in Illinois and Ohio, which is far, but not as far. And so I considered a lot of different things in that move. I think I really loved what I was doing in activation. And the biggest thing is I saw a path forward of growth there for me, both in what I was learning and what types of partnerships I could take on. There's never a dull moment and never 2 days that are alike because you're working with, at times, a partner that's consumer facing and a brand that everyone knows to a back end, ISP company or something that is very different than what, maybe the public is used to. And so you just get a wide variety. So I think when I was reflecting, it was always about, I think partnerships has a lot of variety that I would continue to learn in that type of role. And then the big question I ask myself is there room to grow vertically? Could I actually increase both title, pay, all the things that, you want to keep advancing in your career, not feel like you're stagnant. And so when that opportunity did come for San Jose, it checked those two major boxes. And I think that was a different time in my career. I also was free to move wherever I wanted. And it felt, I felt okay to do that, given my just family and statue of like what I was doing at the time. So it was certainly big, but I think trying to also just factor in what could the next steps be, helps you figure out, like, is this actually going to continue to lead me down the path I want?
Yeah, thinking not just the next job you want, but what is the job after that? Thinking 2 jobs ahead and making sure that you keep moving forward within each of the roles that you're having.
Yeah. And for me, that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep ascending, but like, that's also a great question to ask yourself. Like, do you care about that stuff? Right. Like at some point you do care about money. Like, I think that we're like a little shy to talk about that. But like at some point that does matter if you want to own a home or do other things or just have freedom, financial freedom, like those things matter. And so just knowing your set of values and making sure you're making decisions against those, is super important.
So now let's talk about where you currently are now at Angel City Football Club. You are now the Senior Director of Partnership Marketing, seeing some vertical moves, at least in your title. And you're doing some interesting things there. So can you dive a little bit deeper into what your role there entails?
Yeah. So I wasn't necessarily looking for the next job from San Jose, but having been in the soccer space now for a while, even at the time I'd been in the soccer space for, 5+ years, there was a lot of talk about the women's game and the NWSL, which is the league we play in now, and just different moves to make that more sustainable, make it more just visible, right? I think women's sports traditionally has been just not given the same investment level because it's not producing the same visibility, right? But it takes dollars to invest in, to promote and do the things to make it visible. So it's always been certainly a passion of mine to understand the women's game and support it when I could, having both played and worked for the women's national team as well as the men's, just seeing like a lot of the inner workings of how that all works. There was definitely a talk about a team in LA at the time, and just knew some people that were talking about the project. And so ultimately just kept close tabs on how it was going. And once it was actually like a real thing, began to reach out and just say like, hey, what is this all about? And, what's your vision for the club? And so it was announced in 2020 that the team was in existence, and it was a real team. It, is actually going to be an expansion team starting in 2022. So pretty big run up. But ultimately, again, through relationships, was able to play a role in the building of this club. So when I got to Angel City, it was employee number 23, as I mentioned, and a small group of people around a table making a lot of decisions, and just figuring out how to build not only a soccer club, but a soccer club that was a beacon for women's growth and women's sports and the growth that we saw, the potential for women's sports. So a lot of things we've done over the last, fast forward 2.5, almost 3 years, is really just been able to break barriers for what is possible for women's sports. So my role in that entails overseeing our partnerships here and the activation, a lot of which almost a third of our partners have never done a sports sponsorship before. So being able to educate them and bring in new brands to literally support with their dollars women and the next generation of women's sports, has been really, really special. It's taken pretty much all of my experiences at every level to get to this role, and utilizing a lot of those different experiences, connections, and just passion I have for the women's game, and doing all of that with now a full front office of people that have been doing now this our second season, and really just showing the value that we can bring as a team. And so having things like 16,000 season ticket holders, record-breaking sponsorship revenue that's comparable to some men's teams, like just things like that no one thought were possible. But we've shown that the investment on the front end and getting not only just fans on board, but brands, investors, and everyone in between, there is space for fan and success for women's sports from a business standpoint, which previously didn't exist. It thought it was kind of a nice to have, and oh, that's cute over there. And it's just not the case. So we've proven a lot of people wrong, and it's been a big driver for me personally to continue beating that drum so that every sport and every women's sports team can have the successes that we have, because we're not an outlier. We know there's a fan base ready and willing to pay for this product. So it's been a really incredible journey as I've continued to reflect. It's been a short amount of time, but I like to say it's Angel City dog years, and it feels like it's been 10 years of time at the same time.
That is absolutely incredible. And just to hear how much movement you're able to make at a brand new club too, which is just even harder to do. And especially within women's sports, which just has such a long history of just not getting the attention that it deserves. And very, very inspiring to hear. I want to hear more. You mentioned that a third of your sponsors have never sponsored a sports team before. So not only is it their first time sponsoring a sports team, it's also a new club. And it's a female club. So can you tell me about the challenges that you faced there and how you were able to overcome that to then, like what you said, getting record sponsorships from partners and, getting comparable sponsorships to men's teams?
Yeah. So we started off and really wanted to make sure that we were honoring our community through everything we do, both like our literal community, like people in LA, and then our fans themselves. And so when the team was founded, our head of revenue, who I work really closely with and report into, it was really her idea to say, hey, we need to put our money where our mouth is and actually help the community with our revenue stream. So we have a sponsorship model that was a first of its kind, where 10% of all of our revenue from sponsorship, and each partner has a community program, and we use those dollars to feed into a nonprofit or a community group that we care about that is like affecting people in Los Angeles. So it's really important that it's local. So we said that, and then I get hired to say, okay, we have partners now, like we need to build a program that does that. And so our head of community, who's also fantastic, we sat down and we're like, okay, how do we blend these together? And we've been building that and building it for 3 years now. And we have 30 plus partners that are able to have this impact through their partnership. So that in itself has been a huge differentiator, because I think, especially coming out of COVID, like brands need to stand for more and consumers care about what you stand for. And so we can be that solve and be that conduit for a lot of brands. And of course, we want to make sure they're authentic to our fans too. But that's a really big conversation starter when we talk to brands, because anyone can get behind that. That has less to do with the soccer side, although we have the soccer side and that's amazing. We fold it all together. So our players even come to those events that are funded through these programs with our partners. So it's really just about keeping all those things together and uniting for a bigger mission, which is what we have. So within that, like that attracts brands that have never done a sports sponsorship, but they would consider us because we stand for something even bigger than the sport. So that's really what I think afforded us the opportunity to have those conversations with brands that are probably atypical. And we welcome that. The more dollars being spent in women's sports, like that's fantastic. You don't need to have the experience at a brand who does this at the NFL and the NBA and all the other things. Like that has value too, but our value proposition is a little different.
That is really, really interesting to hear. And 10% is a lot. That's not like, I feel like it's funny to say like 2% or 5%, but 10% is a significant amount of revenue to contribute to this. Like most brands that have some type of incentive like that are doing a lot less. So that's really cool to just hear how big of a number that is. Can you share an example of a community project that you guys have done?
Yeah, there's so many that are my favorite. One that comes to mind is Sprouts, the grocery store. They're wonderful. And we do a program with a group called the Garden School Foundation. And they actually do school garden refreshes and builds in a lot of lower income schools in Los Angeles. And then they also do a teaching program within the schools, like a curriculum that's all about teaching about healthy eating, where food comes from. And these are like robust gardens with like herbs and fruits and vegetables, like all these amazing things. And so we help fund, I think it's over 9 schools now that we maintain. And then we actually turn some of those, School Garden Foundation turns some of those gardens into farmers markets for the local schools or the families that go to those schools that either can't afford it or just want access to actual healthy food. So it's a super robust program, and we have incredible partners of Sprouts that just is so authentically tied. And the Garden School Foundation is just really wonderful to work with as a nonprofit. So collaboration is our middle name at Angel City, and bringing a lot of different people together. And that one definitely sticks out as a really good example.
And I can imagine even for your own team, because having a greater mission and purpose, which you guys already have working within a female soccer club, but I think it's much more motivating. And like you said, you're enjoying like proving everyone wrong and paving the way in something new. And I think even consumers want to be able to support a bigger cause. And so that is really inspiring to hear. And I think an angle or a strategy that maybe most companies would maybe not consider or kind of skip over. And it just has so much amazing benefit. So love.
Yeah, it's been really special. And like personally, right, I never thought I'd work for a startup, but that has also proven to be such an incredible learning experience of just you have to learn a lot on the fly and have a lot of confidence and be okay with failing. I just did a chat yesterday about ability to pivot and ability to like assess along the way of how we're doing. And is a total skill set, and one that I think is so valuable. I think a lot of people get stuck in their ways, or it's just really easy to say, oh, at the end of the project, we'll see how it came. But in a fast paced or any business environment, being able to assess along the way and being okay with making changes, is a skill I'm still learning about, but have learned on the fast track these last few years. And I think it's just a really valuable one.
Yeah, because going from like the US Soccer Federation to this is a huge change, I would imagine, especially since you were an early employee and got to see that growth. And sometimes like people start at startups and then they move to the like bigger corporate structure, but you kind of did that in reverse to starting at bigger companies to then going to like what you said, something that's more fast paced and agile. Is it an environment you find that you thrive in? I know you mentioned that there's some challenges there, or kind of what is the benefit that you enjoy working now at a startup and not, such a big company?
Yeah, it's definitely been highs and lows. Like it can change based on the day. We do a lot on purpose because we have so many different constituents and ideas and things that we want to do differently. So I think it's just been the ability to dream big here, and have true business behind what we do. So it's not just that we're doing good in the community and we are a nonprofit. We ourselves are not. We work with the nonprofits, but the ability to dream big and say, have we thought about this? And there's a lot of just good energy around new ideas that I know is atypical, not just in sports, but in many companies, right? The ability to bring new ideas to the table and it being taken seriously, and say, hey, bring that to so and so, or let's flesh it out, or anything like that. Like that's a really positive environment that I found myself in, that I've enjoyed probably more than I knew, until really being in it.
I'm curious too. So you really like have honed in on partnership marketing throughout your career and it's really been your niche. And you mentioned how this mission, this greater mission that Angel City has helped fuel those partnerships. But I'm also curious from you personally of how you connect and how you personally connect with those brands, because it's not easy. Like it's especially what you're doing. What you're doing is very, very hard. And so you've kind of given us a little bit of sneak peek of that you are really skilled in this like connection and collaboration area. But do you have any other advice with partnership marketing on making new partnerships and making them last?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's truly just personal relationships at its core. Like you'll learn the skills no matter what job you're in. Like you'll learn the skills, you'll learn the mechanism, you'll learn the process, but like, can you connect with another human? And sometimes, to be honest, like I'm not always feeling it. I'm not the biggest people person actually. But I really value the like deep and intimate connection. So if you're at an event or you're doing like big things for us, it's a game or whatever, like I just take it like person by person and ask them questions about themselves and draw, a commonality or connection. And then the follow-ups are big, like sometimes it's, yes, I want to send email follow-ups or text or whatever that is, but we say it a little bit like it's like dating, like in a corporate environment. Like you like, are you at the talking level? Are you at the texting? Like there's just like, you test out the water, like, are we the same kind of vibe or whatever? And not everyone's going to be your exact vibe, and that's okay. But you have to be a little bit of a chameleon in this type of role. And I think a lot of roles that deal with outside constituents and just being relatable to a lot of people takes practice. And it's not about being nice all the time, but just about being conversational, which I would say is also a skill set that I've developed. But you don't have to be bubbly all the time. Being real is the realest thing that you can do to make the initial connection. You don't have to fake that you like things, or I think I've had people ask me that, like, if you're not into cricket or whatever it is that's being talked about, like that's okay. Just be your authentic self. And I think you'll develop the authentic connections.
I love the dating analogy too. I think
Yeah.
that's
I know I tell my team all the time, like, this sounds weird, but like, what level are you guys on? Did you get coffee yet? Like, just meeting up with them and whatnot.
yeah, what's the dating stage? And then you as the partnership one, you have to be the one leading the hopefully leading the progression of the relationship too.
Exactly. Because the best thing we can do is in my role, and again, in any business role, like you want to know the brand you're working with, you want to know their goals and their businesses. So once you have the personal connect, then that leads to so much more information that you can take and internalize and say, hey, what are the next opportunities with them? And you introduce more people from your organization to theirs. And we have now these layered relationships, which are just invaluable to not only the speed at which we work, but for them to feel a part of this. Like all of our partners are just as part of the club as a fan or whomever. And so we want them to feel the love of what they've provided to help us get to our, heights of achievement.
Yeah. And they're very complex too. It's like what you said, like it can't be like, okay, if someone does this, you say this, 'cause it's like, okay, what stage are you guys at? What is your relationship like? What else is happening around, what around the situation in a broader sense that we need to look at to see, what is the right move here? And so, like you said, I can only imagine that just the more you do it, the better you get, because they can be more complex and a little bit tricky.
Totally. And the way I describe that too is like, it's not transactional. You can't think of it that way. It's meant for long term. And you just want to be people they also want to come to with new ideas. You want to be open and welcoming and all those things too. But yeah, it's the opposite of being transactional. Although it's business, it's more than that.
Well, Courtney, we've gone through quite a lot through your career journey today, and I've learned so much, and talking to you has been so much fun. My last question for you is, do you have any advice for women in marketing who maybe want to have a career path like yours?
Yeah, certainly persistence. I say this a lot. People are busy, but also, you just have to be persistent about wanting to talk to someone. And then be okay with not getting your dream job first. I think that's like a common misconception that like your first job has to be the perfect job. It will never be the perfect job. But you have to have a set of values that you're making a decision against to be able to, get the most out of your first job. But more than ever, people are obviously moving jobs a lot more than they used to, but there's never a perfect job. So I think just take that out of your mind that there's going to be a perfect fit for you. It just has to hit on the values for that season of life, and serve you for that. So that would be probably my biggest advice, and the persistence of just finding the right thing for you, talking to people, like it takes persistence. So just keep at it, whatever it is you're trying to achieve.
That's beautiful. And I think the advice there is super important for young people, especially to hear, because there is so much pressure to get that first job right, to make it be the one you've dreamed about through school. And reality is it's really hard. The job hunt process is very hard. And that second piece there, pairing it with that persistence of just going after what you want and not settling. And I think that's also, I'm assuming you do have a lot of persistence in partnership marketing and going after those partnerships. So I love that. And Courtney, thank you again so much for coming on the Sky Society podcast. It has been honestly so much fun chatting with you and just super interesting to hear about this space and your journey. I could definitely keep asking you more questions about this space because it is super, super interesting. But again, appreciate you taking your time and coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.